Good afternoon to everybody, and welcome to the third session of the day. And this session is named Collective Agency in Urban Production. We had 3 presentations, but now we have only 2 presentations. The first one on my right by HULYA, ERTAS. I don't know if I am. Yes. From the Faculty of Architecture, Leuven, and on my left side we have ANNALIINA, NIITAMO from University of Helsinki. So only 2 presentations, and they are coming, the 3 of all are coming from a very different urban and cultural context as Leuven or Helsinki or Cape Town, but having in common the wish to rethinking the production of urban spaces, either discussing the new role of architecture for transition into a post-capitalistic society, or the role of young people in communicative urban planning processes, or reflecting on the importance of gardening practices to shape urban environments and landscapes. We don't have the last one, but we are going to start with Julia. Please, 15 minutes, okay?
Hello everyone. Hello, I'm Hulya. I'm doing my PhD on Commons Architecture, and this is the very first article that I have co-written with my supervisor, Burak Bak, and it doesn't show right, so I will just do it on the other page. So I will just walk through the pad because it was in the form of a presentation, but now we will just go through. Because we worked on this platform, I thought it was a good idea to also do the presentation on the same media. This paper is a manifesto of Commons Architecture, and when you talk about Commons Architecture, everyone starts with the question of what's Commons for you. We take the COSTA's and TERESA definition of Commons as a social system that refers to resources managed and shared according to the rules and norms defined by the productive community. And also looking at the idea of the space in a Lefebvrean way, we take the Commons Architecture as the practice of social reproduction of space. And the way we structured this paper or this manifesto is based on Stavros Stavridis' definition of means should look like ends. So here we are going to propose 3 ends, which are actually key objectives, and 2 means, which are the essential tools for an operative framework of commons architecture. So common good, critical special practice, and post-capitalism are the means, and hacking and feminism are going to be introduced as means to reach these ends. As it might sound a bit ancient and out of fashion, we would like to introduce the term common good back to the discussion, because I think one of the things we tried to avoid was to make a huge introduction to the commons, but rather than take the already existing knowledge taken into account, that everyone knows a bit about it. But in general, commons is based on like this trilogy, which is resources, people, and protocols. However, the relationship between these 3, like as a common practice, itself doesn't imply the direction of the practice itself. I mean, you can have some common practices for evil purposes as well. And so we would like to introduce the common good as the role takes it, certain general conditions that are in an appropriate sense equally to everyone's advantage. And how would you define these general conditions? It's going to be a kind of a deconstruction process, taking the Nancy Fraser's theory of justice as the main starting point. Redistribution, recognition, representation, and meta-level justices and injustices. So for the redistribution, we know that we are living in an economical model that's based on inequality. And about the recognition, we know that women are even when they're in power positions, they can be still raped, harassed, etc. And also that if you are following the recent news about the Cambridge Analytica, etc., that our democracy is in crisis under the practice of neoliberalism. So if you are rich enough, you can buy elections. And also about the meta-level injustices, it is the ecological concern that our planet is dying, and we need to go further the thinking of sustainability and even start thinking about the regeneration of the planet, because otherwise we are going to be dead. Sorry for this extremely pessimistic intro, but I'm going to be optimistic soon, hope. So how can architecture contribute in generating these general conditions, and how can architecture of the common good be practiced? So the idea is to actually activate architecture for the equal redistribution of the Commonwealth, and work in a context that the materials are chosen in an ethically and ecologically conscious manner, and no labor exploitation, of course, and no visible or invisible borders against certain classes, inclusion of marginal groups, and also the architectural form that would not be the representative of the existing unjust power structures, but of a new society of empowered citizens. And of course, the main principles of ecological design, but also going a bit further, stop building unnecessary structures, thinking that architecture will be the solution to all social problems. Because sometimes it's better not to build anything, maybe it's more good for the common good. All these define a new aesthetic conception. So in our thinking, rather than going with the flow and following the mainstream aesthetics of the status quo, commons architecture needs a new understanding of aesthetics. There is already some apparent features of this aesthetics, which we have not defined yet, but we want to work on embracing this new approach and expand it. And 2 is the critical special practice. I find it a bit important to kind of link what we are doing to the history of thought in architecture. So I think you already know what a critical special practice is, but it starts with Tafuri, and then now Jane Randall and allies are working a lot, and it's mostly focusing on the everyday activities of the citizens and the ephemerality of the becomings of spaces. And in this sense, Occupy movements are of course a critical special practice, and the idea is to make a kind of a bottom-up creation of temporary commons, collective ownership and management of resources, etc. So the critical special practice has this subversive nature, which in the long run would be would be operational for a transition into post-capitalism. How we handle the commons thinking is we feel that we don't feel. We think we are mostly in the anti-capitalist thinking on the commons. We don't consider commons as a kind of a reformative tool in the existing neoliberal policies. And the commons itself can be a post-capitalist project that would make the transition to another world, because the enclosure movement ended the common use of land and resources and started the era of capitalism. So rather than trying to go back, we are trying to find a way to go forward with opening up the spaces. So this is the folk politics, the ephemerality. I will just go quickly. But in general, the post-capitalist project is very much characterized by the re-emergence of the commons. So it is how can we extend the discussion toward anti-neoliberal practices based on solidarity, shared ownership, sustainable production and consumption, and fair distribution. I find it important to dream of a world without property rights, either material or immaterial, and an architecture of unlocked doors, permeable walls, temporarily occupied and shared, ecologically, economically, and technologically smart habitats, and the special co-creation of collective living, decision-making, etc. So these three were the objectives that we would like to reach through commons architecture, and I will propose quickly two tools. Okay, perfect. The first one is hacking. I find hacking important because it's actually the practice of the free, libre, open software developers. So when you think of natural commons, there's always this problem of scarcity. But if you think about the artificial commons and the production of knowledge, you don't see this tragedy of the commons as it was described by Hardin. So the idea of the open source is to be not based on propriety, but be based on shared ownership, which offers customizability by promoting adoption and improvement. And this is done actually through the practice of hacking. I will read this long quote by Mackenzie's work because it gives a very good idea. Hackers create the possibility of new things entering the world, not always great things or even good things, but new things. In art, in science, in philosophy and culture, in any production of knowledge where data can be gathered, where information can be extracted from it, and where in that information new possibilities for the world produced, there are hackers hacking the new out of the old. While we create these new worlds, we do not possess them. But we do not own what we produce, it owns us. So this idea of hacking new out of the old gives us a fresh perspective on working on the already existing structures. It's not, going beyond the boring discussions on restoration, renovation, etc. How can we deal with the already existing building stock that we have? And non-ownership is also, I find it important, so you kind of open up your knowledge production to a wider audience, like I'm trying to do, for example, with my PhD, where you can just join to this pad and start collaborating with me and some others. As you can see, there are some people already. I think Antonio is viewing us. The last tool, I will go for feminism, because it's not about just like the women's rights or the. It has a long history, but we need to look for a third wave of feminism, which is going beyond recognition politics. And the idea here is to consider feminism for governing the commons architecture. The idea is to have an inclusive, based on collective caretaking and hybrid hierarchical models for commons architecture. For the inclusion, it's important to have a safe place, which makes it easier for everyone to develop belonging, and also which is providing a hospitality for all. And for the collective caretaking, it's, as you know, the caretaking is historical, the women's thing, but how can you find a way to make it in a collective manner? And with the hybrid hierarchical models, what we are trying to focus on is the mainly hard and negrist theory of strategic movements and tactical leadership. So it's not, it is a good solution to prevent corruption or overuse of power within the collective work. So, as rather than a conclusion, I would define commons architecture as a critical and post-capitalist special practice for generating common good through the strategies and tactics of hacking and feminism. And this paper and this manifesto is actually a call for co-ideation, which means that everyone can join and we can just work on this collaborative path, which also needs some protocols that I need to develop, or we need to develop all together. But yeah, if you want to join, just you can find us at these emails, or I will be around. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, hi, can you hear me from here? Yeah. Okay, it's nice to see people, although there's a Portugal game going on at the same time. So my name is ANNALIINA. I'm from the University of Helsinki, Finland. I'm an early phase PhD candidate from the Department of Media and Communications Research. So today I'll be talking about my still very ongoing research. I actually anticipated my fieldwork to be already done by now, but I'm only able to start this fall due to changed working conditions this spring. But next fall I will be conducting these metro walk-alongs. But I nonetheless wish to spark some conversation and maybe hear from you if you have experiences or literature tips or suggestions for my upcoming fieldwork. So throughout the previous days, I think we've been talking a lot about, or we have been talking about the right to the city, but I haven't heard that many, or any at least in English, on focusing on young people, and that's what my research is about, and the kind of institutional side of the urban planning processes and participatory urban planning, where young people are implemented into the planning processes. So I'm working in a research project called Digital Youth in Media City, where we research how digital technologies are present in urban lives of young generations in Helsinki and St. Petersburg, Russia. We're looking at what opportunities and restrictions do digital technologies bring to the lives of young people in a media city. and how should we understand participation and belonging of young people. So we use the term media city, which is previously used by Muriel Giorgio and Scott McQuire, to explore how digital media and urban life are intertwined in cities. They talk about how life in cities is mediatized in many ways through the use and presence of smartphones, digital screens, CCTV, commercials, and everyday interactions among citizens in the urban sphere. So far we have researched youth cultural phenomena in the two cities, sticker artists in St. Petersburg, Pokemon Go communities in Helsinki and St. Petersburg, as well as graffiti and urban circus communities in Helsinki. So far, themes of surveillance, control, and belonging have emerged, and we're researching them more closely now. And we have a focus on the metro space as a urban space. And our research team consists of sociologists, youth researchers, and media researchers. And I'm a media researcher. So my fieldwork for the research project is still upcoming. I'll be looking at the institutional side of urban planning in the context of the right to the city and communicative urban planning, especially with young people. So I will be researching the method of using these metro walks, a form of go-along interviews, to explore the possibility of using participatory research methods in urban planning. As context, urban planning in Finland, it's very municipally led. So we don't have really urban planning offices or such. So I'll be conducting these metro walks next fall with young people aged 14 to 17 in the new western extension line of the existing metro system in Helsinki and Espoo, Finland, which is joining. It starts from here. Sorry, here. So this is the new line. So my research questions, I will be exploring the possibility of the metro walk-alongs between young people and urban planners as a method to reach the voice of young people in urban planning processes. This research contributes empirical knowledge of the use of the method, not only as a participatory research method, but especially as one to use in official urban planning by the municipality. Another aim is to illustrate how young people conceptualize the metro environment as an urban space. In doing so, I wish to describe varying perceptions of space theorized by Lefebvre that young people bring up during the metro walks. So this article joins in on the academic discussion that aims to contribute in how young people are seen as a part of research and planning as equal knowledge creators instead of passive research objects. And here you see my research questions. So, about the metro, it's important to bring up that, well, the metro line is not that complicated as in many cities of the world. And so it's basically one line that diverges into kind of a pitchfork at the end there. And now last year, this western extension line opened from here, Lauttasaari, which is still in Helsinki, and it goes to Espoo here. So from here until here. And it's the first time now in Finland that the metro line goes between two cities. And why this is interesting right now is because, well, Espoo and Helsinki, they're characteristically very different. Helsinki, or at least this downtown area here, is quite densely built, and it's being built even more densely. And Espoo it's very suburban and private car ownership dominated. So what I'm interested in is how the metro possibly affects the mobility patterns of young people in Espoo. So we'll be walking along the route of only in the new one in Espoo, so not Helsinki. And possibly how it presents as a space of free time and leisure, because in previous research, public transportation hubs have been found to be these kind of gathering spots for young people. And the metro especially, it's been experienced, or in research has shown that the metro line has been experienced by young people as the least safe environment of all transportation modes, although it has been identified as a strong place to hang out. So yeah, currently I'm working on how to conceptualize the metro space as an urban space, and I've come across this term surveyed space by Koskela. She talks about how it's changed as characteristically due to surveillance cameras, and the metro space in Finland, it's kind of semi-public, semi-private space, so it's municipally owned, but it's upkept by private companies, surveillance and security, as well as the technical provider of the metro system is a private company. Another concept of silent space by Häyrynen, who talks about the metro as this kind of silent space that's kind of left, how it's kind of so mundane, and we don't really see it otherwise than as a mode of transportation or a kind of transportation hub. But actually there's a lot of things that are going on outside of this primary use. Also, Frank and Stevens talk about loose space that describes the activities that aren't really productive, like traveling to work, or reproductive, like buying necessities, but this kind of unprogrammed space for spontaneity, and how these unprogrammed spaces are important to have in cities. And they here, quote unquote, say that here is the breathing space for city life, offering opportunities for exploration and discovery, for the unexpected, the unregulated and spontaneous, and the risky. So this is kind of why, as it's identified as a place for young people to hang out, and it's experienced as an unsafe place, it's, we find that it's important to research this area, or this space. So traditionally the input of children and young people has been left to the fringes of official urban planning processes, and according to many researchers, collaboration between young people and urban planning in Finland is more rhetoric than upheld in concrete and permanent processes, let alone supported by the law or policies. Participation of young people is still quite project-based and hasn't been able to challenge current top-down planning processes, which the communicative turn in urban planning has tried to contest. Official urban planning representatives, however, report to be missing the views of young people who are seen as a marginal group and whose impact on official planning processes is weak. Simultaneously, schools in Finland, for example, ponder ways of bringing young people, their students, more actively a part of society and in planning their living environments. So urban planners report wanting to reach young people better as a group to participate in planning processes, but state that it is a very difficult task to find them. So this leads us to the problematic side of adult participation. Who participates whom and with what goal or intention? Participation of young people is often contested because it is seen to be done by the norms set by adults and is used more as a consultation mechanism than a forum for democratic engagement and deliberation. So participating young people usually faces practical, institutional, cultural and ethical challenges, where the practical challenges are usually ones that may root from insufficient funds or resources, or at least that's what the urban planners say. But many researchers bring out that actually it's more having to do with attitudes, that the resources are somewhere there, but they're just not allocated for participating young people, or participation in general. And also these historical conceptualizations of how we see young people and the child as part of society may exclude them from the idea of public participation. So it seems that a common success factor in participatory planning projects is the presence of a reflective mediator, or a link who creates conditions for a just and interactive process that levels unbalanced power settings between the young person or young people and the planning machinery. In communicative urban planning, this is conceptualized as a reflective planner, but I'm not sure if it should be the actual urban planner who's supposed to be this reflective mediator, but instead maybe a youth worker or a participatory or participative researcher. So this is what I am looking to explore in this paper. So what I'm doing now is planning a research setting where the participating young people set the agenda for the walks and bring up the content to be discussed during the walks. So they're not kind of enforced from me too heavily, or my kind of research agenda, more letting the topics come from like bottom up. But as many research kind of shows from before, that if you don't really have a plan with young people, then there's necessarily nothing really happens. So I'm looking to do a kind of a preliminary or a backup set of questions that bases on Lefebvre's kind of conceptualizations of space and spatial practices. So now I'm looking how to kind of operationalize this very abstract theory, which I don't think he too much opens in his theory. So if you have any tips on this, I would be very grateful. So I'm looking at incorporating questions of feelings of safety, unease, control, limitations, mobility, and sociality in this set of questions. So, what is a metro walk? A metro walk is a go-along interview method which combines its ethnographic research to study interactions between humans and their environments. The go-along interview refers to an in-depth qualitative interview that is conducted by a researcher in a mobile way on outings in the informant's familiar environments. It has potential to access transcendent and reflexive aspects of people's lived experiences. By being present in the environment with the informant, the researcher is able to gain rich qualitative data on how the physical, social, and mental dimensions of space interact with young people. So far, during my literature review, I found the walk-along method in urban environments to be mostly an Anglo-American tradition, methodologically explored especially by Margaret Kusenbach and Richard Carpiano in the early 2000s. So I'm still looking at more recent literature, so I would be also grateful for any possible tips on this. But what I find promising with the method is the possibility, at least, to level power relations between the researcher/urban planner and the young person in question, or the young people. And my aim is to create a setting where the group of young people themselves determine the agenda, routes, and content for the walks. So the go-along creates a more inclusive process where the informant becomes a more active participant in the interview, a sort of tour guide for the researcher, instead of being simply a subject of research. So gaining empirical information on perceptions and the everyday is difficult due to their eludicity. It's hard to verbalize the mundane, but the mundane may reveal something very telling of our social realms and hierarchies. And kind of grasping this, I suspect, is going to be very difficult, but this is the task I'm going to try at least. So far it's been quite difficult to find the young people for my research, but very early on I noticed that the importance of a bridge builder in my research efforts, and in this case it's one of the youth centers by one of the metro stops here in Matinkylä. They were really interested in my research, and they promised to help me find these young people who spend time at the youth center. And as context, youth work in Finland is very established with this kind of special targeting youth work. So it means that the youth workers go where the young people are instead of waiting for the problems kind of to come to them. So they're kind of searching for where the young people are. And there's this special project concerning with, or they're at the kind of in the transportation hubs, railway stations and metro and such. So I'm looking to finding two groups of around 6 young people aged 14 to 17, one youth worker and an urban planner or 2 to join me for these walks. And we'll be walking in the metro platforms and the surrounding areas. And in addition to only walking and talking with the young people, I'm looking at doing some photo elicitation. So they would be taking photos with their mobile phones and presenting them later on to the group, and talking about kind of what gained their attention in the metro area, in metro space, as well as peer interviewing. But we'll see how this plays out. And after the walks, I'll be interviewing all parties to hear about their experiences of the method, to later on work on it. Yes. Yes, yeah. So, well, this is the kind of conclusions or open questions I still... and they are many, yeah. So yeah, I'm wondering whether to kind of have the content of the walks as open-ended or semi-structured. How am I going to kind of bring the contents of these spatial practices and perceptions into the walks? And of course avoiding the pitfalls of adult participation, where I don't want to enforce my kind of research agenda too much on them, but still contributing at the same time to the academic discussion. Yeah, so there's some of the literature I've been looking at, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So, we had two interesting and challenging working presentations. Now it's time to questions or comments or debate. 15 minutes. Yes, please.
It's ANNALIINA. I work quite often with municipal governments as a participatory artist to research, and one thing I found really good to engage particularly adolescents, so teenagers rather than children, young people, is not just peer interview, but to actually give the technology over and to let them do the work in their own time without you being there. Empower them as a journalist, as a researcher in their own right. And they can be incredibly creative and you get a very different response to you walking along with a recording device and kind of forcing the discussion. And I mean, particularly depending on which young people you can source through that centre, which is a really great resource for you, you may well come across young people that are really interested in urban research or journalism or things like that you can kind of tap into that skill set, empower them with the technology and see where they go. But the other thing is if you give me your email address, I have a colleague in Australia who is looking at adolescent participatory design in Sydney.
Okay.
And I'm sure she'd be really happy to connect. She's right at the end of her PhD.
Oh, that sounds amazing. Thanks. My email address is there.
I'll photograph it.
Okay, thanks.
A question or comment to Leuven. Sorry, Mrs. Starkers, and the other trying to find the space.
It's hard to hear. It's hard to hear you.
Okay. Sorry I was late. I was trying to find space. I was in the other room.
Yeah, me too.
I'm Duncan. I'm an architect from Ireland. Regarding hacking and the culture where it came from, the philosophical hello? Okay, third time. Hi, Duncan, an architect from Ireland, and sorry for being late. So, about hacking and the culture where it came from, in some areas the radical philosophies that came from that world, not purely technological and ownership issues, but the philosophical society views, no? Much of which was deeply political, no? It was part of the Indie Media Network during the war in Iraq and England, and after the Indie Media Network grew out of a need to create a communication space and community to take on the dominant order. No, so the question I have, when you were finishing up about architecture and feminist architecture, one of the things I've got from the last few days is that I feel that there's been an absence of discussion about municipalism, social ecology, and the radical alternatives that are being explored in different fields, relating to cities. And I think that it's a strategy that offers huge potential. I'm wondering, in your area, do you have connections with the municipalist groups? I know there's people from Barcelona here, there's from other places as well. And I'm wondering, I don't know, Lisbon, if there's people from Lisbon, if they know that there's municipal projects underway or groups that are trying to work at that, if they could let us know. And then also a collective invite to Fearless Cities, which came from the municipalist network, trying to facilitate greater interconnectivity between the different groups globally. People went to Barcelona in 2017, and now in New York, in the end of July, they're going to have a conference about building up the network and making change. So if you're not already connected into it, it'd be great for you and all of us to connect deeper into that and to deepen our discussion and to go a little bit out of the academic bubble and a bit more into the community reality, because I think I'm coming more from the activist world. I don't really know academia, so I'm wondering how that relates into, because for me as an architect, I think it's a massive moment we have of this coming together to really make the change we need in front of the ecological crisis.
Maybe we can answer to these two questions, and again we can collect some other ones. Okay, so ANNALIINA.
Thanks for your tip. We've actually, in this project, not by myself, but we've been doing this here. We went to one of the suburbs in Helsinki. I'll show you. It's by this metro station. Where is it? Kontula here, which is traditionally kind of seen as a troubled neighborhood. We did these walk-alongs in the neighborhood with the children or adolescents who live there. And they were able to, or we wanted them to show us their neighborhood, like through their eyes. And we gave them cameras and camera courses for the work, and they did that for a month, and they were paid by the municipality. It was like a summer job for them, and they produced photos of their own neighborhoods, which in the public eye has been seen as a troubled one, but actually in the end it looked really friendly and green and whatnot. But yeah, we found that very useful, and I'm happy to use that in the metro walks as well.
Okay. Yeah. So, Julia?
I take your words mostly as comments, so I will continue a little bit on the debate. First on the hacking and all these like open source movement. It is all these kind of very subversive movements. They are very also much open to co-option, which we saw in the end that GitHub was sold to Microsoft, which is a kind of it is one of the biggest platforms for open source coders and programmers, and the content they generated is just sold to Microsoft, who is a kind of e-corp. But still, how do you deal with all these processes of co-option? This also, I think, the commons thinking has to learn a lot from the open source movement, because they are very much, I think, advanced in collaborative work, how they develop all these softwares and so on. So for my research also, while I'm trying to kind of co-write it with a wider community, I'm now experimenting like Gitbook and things like that. So it's the idea is to use the already existing tools and kind of find ways to hack them. Now, I'm also considering if it's going to be a platform where we're going to share everything, we can even like adapt the already existing source code of Wiki Tribune and things like that. So, the way I want to do this research, I also want to be very much in line with what I'm saying. So, if I'm talking about hacking, I should do some hacks during my research too. And actually, my background is an editor. I've been doing an architecture magazine for more than 14 years, and I'm still continuing to do that. So I'm not very much embedded in the academia, so which is also, I think it's a good thing. And with the comment on the municipalism, I agree with you. It's what they are doing is very much important, but is also very open to co-option. You have to always think like there are good things, but it might go very bad. They are testing kind of a local. I think Portugal won. Yay, is my team. Okay, sorry. I'm trying to read more on Bookchin and how they also set up this Kurdish town in Rohova based on his ideas. In general, I see municipalism as a kind of way to go beyond this thinking of, it's going to be state who is deciding on the things, or it's going to be the private market. The municipalism brings us this idea that can go beyond, because the commons is also generated through going beyond this. So how can you empower the local citizens through local governments. But still, the local government itself acts as an activist still on the bottom-up level. I find it really interesting and important, but how it is practiced, it's also for open for co-option. I know it's very strong now in Barcelona, Madrid, and Valencia, because now I'm based in Barcelona, but I will move to Brussels again. But still, municipalism is an important issue. But I should maybe add something, that I want to focus on the really materiality of architecture, because on urban commons there are lots of research still going on. So how all these ideas are transformed into kind of a physical architectural space, that I want to focus on. So I'm reading a lot on municipalism, but it is not going to be my main research area. I want to be the more architectural scale.
Two more questions. I don't know if we had the conditions to go on, but yes, one or two more questions.
I would like to ask, thank you both first. I would like to ask ANNALIINA, how do you think that these research methods and mapping that you're doing can contribute to planning? Because I guess a lot of what happens in those very generic gray zones is happening exactly because they're not curated, or because things are happening in the gray fields, and because of their attributes that people pass by, so young people can chill out, as you said, those times like after school, and then, I don't know, they can smoke or listen to music while no one notices, for example. But if all this becomes so public through your research, and actually the metro belongs to a developer or to the city, I don't know whom, but actually they do not want that young people stay there because there's Wi-Fi and they bring their beers and they hang out.
Just the last question, if there is someone. No? So, ANNALIINA?
Yes, thanks for the good point. I don't think my aim is to change the space as it is necessarily. In our research project, we also kind of traveled with young people along the metro line and kind of interviewed and discussed with them how they feel about, like, safety-wise about the metro space, and they're like how it could affect planning in the future. For example, the metro cars have changed from being kind of these single compartment train metro cars to these long, where you can walk if you feel unsafe, for example. This came up in our interviews. If you feel unsafe when you're sitting somewhere, you may walk along to the other end of the metro, for example. So I think I wouldn't say that I want to, with my research, affect the urban space in itself, so that planners would, I don't know, accommodate young people in the metro platforms in a way that it changes drastically, but maybe these kind of minimal changes that can occur that are quite critical for feelings of safety, for example, which has been critical or come up in previous research. Not to create these new hangout places necessarily, but find these kind of maybe hidden problems, hidden issues that haven't come up because the voice of young people is still quite marginal. It's more maybe bringing up the knowledge and then seeing what's possible in doing with the knowledge, instead of directly affecting the urban space. I don't know if that answered, but I would say enhancing the voice of young people instead of affecting concrete planning process or planning of the metro spaces or platform spaces in itself, but kind of to bring a constant flow of knowledge or information from young people that may change how, for example, feelings of safety are taken into concern. Maybe.
Thank you. Thank you to everybody and for your participation and discussion. And now we have to close the session. Thank you.